Here's a type of house called a Cape Cod. Now this one that you're seeing is a modified Cape because the newer ones usually are wider than the traditional ones, and they have 3 windows on the roof as opposed to the older, smaller style which has 2 windows. Towards the front of the house you've got the sloping wall, and then towards the back of the house there's an opposed sloping wall that can be exactly the same mirror image of the front, or it may be slightly different, raked differently, or the length of it may be different. It doesn't really matter. The excess or selvage here is represented by the dark blue line. After I move to the left, installing all the panels on the knee wall and leaving the excess at the tops of the sheets, I come around the corner into the alcove. I can tell you from experience that almost every dormered room I've ever seen is very crooked. Usually it's the top of the knee wall that is not horizontally plumb. But the first thing we have to do is repair this very deep piece of wall damage here. This room has a nice corner cabinet that goes all the way to the ceiling. So what I'm going to be doing is starting to the left of that corner cabinet, moving all the way around the room and then coming back to it. And something like that just isn't visible to the naked eye. If this was a plaid or something with horizontal lines, I'd be in trouble. Check for the actual plumb and then see if I can do something, since I'm double cutting here, giving me a little bit of leeway. I'm going to measure this where it meets the door frame with the ruler. We get to go around a very old, heavy steam radiator that's got the old wallpaper behind it. Now, luckily, this radiator is going to have a cover, like a big box to cover its ugliness. So I really don't have to do behind here, but I want to because this is a perfect chance to show you how to do one of these. And there it is. The other day I was installing wallpaper in a powder room in a residence, and I passed by this den. As I was walking by, I could see that something was horribly out of kilter, and when seen from the side, you can see how it's like a roller coaster, but when seen dead on with this pattern, it wasn't apparent that the dots were moving up and down. The only thing that was apparent, that everything looked straight at the ceiling line. Then in the kitchen segment, with the curved soffit, I showed you how to make overlaps, double cuts, and slightly wedge-shaped cuts. So let's say you're hanging a geometric pattern, and by geometric I mean something with a strong horizontal line, a strong vertical line. It could be a grid, it could be a plaid, or it could be dots, and I could do whatever I wanted to. This one had sort of a precision match, and I couldn't overlap it because I would lose pattern. To the casual eye here in this mid close-up shot, it looks like everything matches perfectly at the seam. But let's take a closer look. When seen very close up here, about a foot away from it, you can see at the seam that there is an intentional mismatch. It could be seen from a distance, and it just wasn't an option. And this green circle around the very tip of this key shows my other problem. If I try to move the pattern up in a stair step, well, the next piece that you see is going to have that as a sliver, not as a nice black rectangle that is about a centimeter or a quarter of an inch in height. And then when I got to the middle of the sheet, I pushed it or played with it so that that tip of the key at the ceiling matched exactly the last time it appeared to the right of this panel. Sometimes they have very highly contrasting colors like black on white, and then other times they're more tone on tone, so it's not as pronounced in terms of the vertical lines. Is because you get an opportunity to fool around with them and change the way that they are oriented by using some of the tricks that you've learned already. After it's done, smoothed down, and all cleaned up, you can see what it looks like here after the stripe is forced to look plumb. Where the door hinge is, and I already know that the stripes are not behaving, there's going to be a very narrow stripe there, which is going to look bad because it's something you can see from a mile away. If you read the instruction sheets on most liner papers, they say to let it dry overnight. And you can never go wrong letting it dry overnight. But sometimes waiting for liner paper to dry, particularly in a small bathroom, means that you've turned what could be a one-day job into a two-day job. And that means travel time and a lot more complication. You can hang liner in one day. Templating is a technique that you use for materials that won't bend because they're so stiff that you can't bend them around obstacles, or materials that you don't want to bend because in the process of doing it you may crimp it and leave permanent fold lines in the material. That's why it's a nonwoven. It's, as you know now, it's strippable. Another good material to use would be ordinary fabric-backed vinyl wall covering. You can also see right here that I put a lovely crimp in the liner paper. Not that it matters, but thank God it wasn't the Tinseltown or something that you would be unable to decrimp. The cut lines up beautifully. No adjustments are necessary. It really looks very crisp. There's no areas that need to be touched at all. When you do it like this. And also, if you're afraid that the material is going to show crimp marks or some sort of wrinkling because you've let it hang by its weight from a height, well then you want to use a roller for a material like that. Things get considerably more complicated when you're papering the ceiling with a pattern and the pattern is running down onto the wall. Now, if the pattern has a definite up and down orientation, what you usually do is have the up orientation above your head as you enter a room, and then it runs to the focal wall across the room, and the pattern runs down that wall, matching where the ceiling line meets the wall. There's nothing I can think of in wallpapering that can't be done without a laser. And a lot of times I don't even want to use the laser for reasons that I'll get into. But there are times when it is very handy to use a cross beam laser, mostly for the horizontal beam, and in my case, not so much for the vertical. Problem comes in when you head down the wall. How do you cut your patterns? Do you go climb up the ladder every time for each piece to see that you didn't cut it too short? Well, there's another way to do this. In an earlier segment, you saw me do the mouse hole archways and the square archways, wrapping the paper around and going into the next room with the same paper. A lot of times, what happens is you need to change the paper. It's a new pattern in the new room. Since this is a vinyl over vinyl application, I'm getting a can of vinyl over vinyl that I have here in my basement, which is where this is all set up, and I'm going to apply it on top so that we don't get any seams coming loose over time.